The NBA playoffs have arrived, and the best odds on basketball are on Novig. Stop paying sportsbook fees and start making your predictions on America's #1 sports trading app. Check out Novig and use code WOJ to get $50 worth of Novig coins when you spend your first $5. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 or older. Please play responsibly.
For me, there's I would go Darryn Peterson at 1. I think he's the primo talent in this draft. A lot of people didn't get to see that because of injuries and the type of year that he had. I don't know that the average college basketball fan got to really understand what makes Darryn Peterson such a special talent. And then at 2, I think there's a real argument to be made for Cam Boozer, really. I think that, he's been the most productive player in every setting that he's played in. And, his ability to handle, pass, shoot, and guard at the 4 position at 6'9" is really, really unique. And I think that's something that you could really build your offense around. And, he's also the youngest of the 3. And, the analytics will tell you that he's, runaway #1 pick. And I think, history says that you have to really look at that. You have to study that really closely. But then, AJ Dybantsa, a guy who's 6'9" with that kind of frame, who, is a, legitimate shot creator who can, anchor really your offense. And that, he led college basketball in scoring, and, he could guard, everywhere from 1 through 4. He was inconsistent in that regard. The defensive playmaking isn't exactly what you would hope, but, he's also really young and he's an exceptional talent. And so you can make a case for any of the 3. That I would go Peterson 1, Boozer 2, Dybantsa 3.
Welcome back into Jonathan Givony, the founder of Draft Express, on the road, evaluating talent somewhere in North America. I believe that's a hotel room in Mexico that you're in, Jonathan. But this is your time of year, NBA draft. As deep of a draft as we've seen in some years. How does this draft stack up, Jonathan, to recent groups historically? Listen, obviously you never know until 3 or 4 years out, but in terms of anticipation, the depth of this draft has people pretty excited.
I think what makes this draft really special is the talent at the top 3. You really can't go wrong with any of them, whether it's AJ Dybantsa, Darryn Peterson, or Cam Boozer. All of those guys are, #1 pick caliber guys. I think they're all going to be all-stars. They all have really good chances of being all NBA players. And so I think that, these are guys that you could build your franchise around. And so that's why this is going to be such a tough decision at the top for the Wizards. I think a lot of people just penciled in AJ Dybantsa there at the top from day one. And there's a very good chance that he does go #1. But I do think you have to give really strong consideration, to Darryn Peterson and Cam Boozer, because those guys are phenomenal talents. Now, after that, from 4 through 60, I think it's a fairly normal draft. I think a lot of the depth of the draft got diminished by first of all, by players not even entering the draft because of NIL. You saw guys like a Thomas Houck, who was, potential lottery pick, top 20 pick, who decided not to even enter the draft. And then you saw, guys who were first round picks who decided, to pull their name out at the withdrawal deadline. And so, college basketball is a really, really attractive option to a lot of people right now. If you can make $3 to $5 to even $7 million at the very top end, that's a ton of money. And there's no reason why you would want to be a second round pick or on a 2-way contract if you're a multi-million-dollar player. 2-way contracts are non-guaranteed deals. And, and the money in college is real. And the experience of playing college is phenomenal. The game has never been better. It's it's really, really hot, and people want to be associated with college basketball, and not just players, but also coaches and executives, GMs, and players from around the world. And so it's never been a better time to be affiliated with college basketball. And so I mean, that does have a real trickle-down effect to this year's draft class. But so I think from 4 to 60, I think it's fairly normal. But there's a lot of good players. And, we've seen year after year that the top players, they don't really go in the top 3. It doesn't go in any specific order. You could have a Giannis Antetokounmpo drafted, like at the end of the lottery, the mid-first. You could have, Rudy Gobert at the end of the first round. You can have Nikola Jokic drafted in the middle of the second round. So I think that's going to happen again this year. It happens every year. So that's why the NBA draft is so exciting, and it's so unpredictable. It's so hard to forecast, but that's going to be fun. I can't wait to see how it plays out.
Jonathan, if you were drafting at number 1 and you just take need out of it, and you said, and I think teams generally do, they're going to take the best available player there, the player they think, typically if you're drafting that high, you're not, unless you're Oklahoma City in some year, you're not a contender. You're a team that's just looking to add the best possible talent. Could you make a case for all 3 of those players at number 1?
Oh, there's no question about it. Yeah, you can make it. I mean, for me, there's I would go Darryn Peterson at 1. I think he's the primo talent in this draft. A lot of people didn't get to see that because of injuries and the type of year that he had. I don't know that the average college basketball fan got to really understand what makes Darryn Peterson such a special talent. And then at 2, I mean, I think there's a real argument to be made for Cam Boozer, really. I think that, he's been the most productive player in every setting that he's played in. And, his ability to handle, pass, shoot, and guard at the 4 position at 6'9", is really, really unique. And I think that's something that you could really build your offense around. And, he's also the youngest of the 3. And, the analytics would tell you that he's, runaway number 1 pick. And I think, history says that you have to really look at that. You have to study that really closely. But then, AJ Dybantsa, a guy who's 6'9", with that kind of frame, who, is a legitimate shot creator who can, anchor really your offense. And that, he led college basketball in scoring, and, he could guard, everywhere from 1 through 4. He was inconsistent in that regard. I mean, the defensive playmaking isn't exactly what you would hope, but, he's also really young, and he's an exceptional talent. And so you can make a case for any of the 3 of them. I would go Peterson 1, Boozer 2, Dybantsa 3. It might play out exactly the opposite on draft night, so we'll have to see, 3 to 5 years from now, who is right or wrong. But it's a really special draft class. I think you can't go wrong with any of those 3.
Jonathan, when you say that the analytics show Boozer's a runaway, should be the number 1 overall pick, has been the most productive. To the average fan, what does that mean? What out of the numbers, what about the numbers suggest that he has separated himself from Peterson and Dybantsa?
He's just dominated his peers at every age group, whether it's high school, AAU, FIBA, college. Everywhere that he's played, he's been essentially the younger guy playing up. And to be able to be so dominant, so efficient, and fill up the box scores in so many different ways with points, rebounds, assists, blocks, steals, 3s, 2s, and to do it in so many different ways, and to do it in a winning context at the same time, that's almost unprecedented, and the models will tell you a guy who is that good in every setting, in every age group, that's going to translate, that's going to be an all-star. And so, but the question that NBA teams are asking, not whether he's 20 and 10, and we know he's going to be 20 and 10, probably from day 1. It's whether you could build your team around a power forward right now. Now I would argue he's a power forward who can play point guard. It's almost you're talking about a cross between like a Jokic and a Tim Duncan. And if you're getting that, at 1, you're pretty set, like for a very long time. And so anybody that passes on Cam Boozer, I would say make sure like that what you're passing on, because there's this sense in the public domain. There's is he athletic enough, and and a can he guard and all that. I think that's nonsense, honestly. Like, a guy who is unathletic doesn't rebound at the rate that he does. He doesn't finish around the rim at the rate he does. He doesn't rack up steals and blocks at the rate he does. So, the NBA game is not built around athleticism right now. It's built around instincts, built around feel. It's built around timing and processing. And in every aspect of that, lens, Cam Boozer is not just an all-star, he's an all-NBA player. So, at 18 years old, you better make sure that you know what you're passing on if you're going to pass on Cam Boozer at number 1.
The NBA playoffs have arrived, and the best odds on basketball are on Novig. Stop paying sportsbook fees and start making your predictions on America's #1 sports trading app. Check out Novig and use code WOJ to get $50 worth of Novig coins when you spend your first $5. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 or older. Please play responsibly. How much do you think teams value players who grew up in the game, who have, a father who was an all-star in the NBA? We saw it with, you go through the league. There's been, the Steph Currys, the Klay Thompsons, Andrew Wiggins, players who have parents, fathers, and mothers in a lot of cases too, who are high-level players. But I think the guys like Boozer, who grew up around the locker room, who understand the lifestyle, they've been around it, they see what the work looks like. Dylan Harper, coming out of Rutgers last year and the impact he's made in his rookie season. I mean, dramatic. How much is that weighed?
I think there's a comfort level with a guy like Cam Boozer, just the background, the intel, the professional habits that have been instilled, like you said, from a very young age. So I think that's part of it, but I think it's only a small part of it. Now, history says that, that like the second generation NBA player, I mean, that guy pans out at a better rate than your average player, and I think some of the models, again, reflect that. People have studied this, and they realize that that these guys are underrated in a sense, which is crazy to think about, but you look at like a Scottie Pippen Jr., for example, undrafted player who is going to have a 10, 12-year NBA career. I mean, it's a long list of players in that mold who, like a Steph Curry, who went, like you said, went 9th in the draft, is far and away the best player in that draft class. He's going to end up being one of the best players of all time. And so it's not the reason to draft Cam Boozer, but it's one of, 8 or 10, man, like there's a long list of reasons to draft Cam Boozer, and that's definitely part of it. I mean, like, the background, like the intel, it's all stellar. And so like that gives you a comfort level when you're drafting 1, 2, or 3, and you're going to build your franchise around this kind of player. Everybody talks about the interviews in Chicago, like he's so mature, he's so professional. But like the other guys are too, honestly. Like this is like, there's nothing you can really nitpick about a Darryn Peterson or an AJ Dybantsa from a character standpoint. And so, I mean, the cream rises to the top in every draft class, and this is just another example this year.
Jonathan, with Darryn Peterson, is there any mystery among the teams drafting about the time, the in and out of the lineup, the why he was not able to be at full strength and play full minutes through the year? Are teams clear with what exactly happened? Do they feel like they know?
I think they do. Yeah. I mean, they've done all their background and all their research on it. And I think there was a legitimate injury there. I mean, and you could see it in his play. Anybody that scouted Darryn Peterson from when he was 15 years old, growing up in high school at grassroots settings and at the FIBA level, at the McDonald's All-American practices and the scrimmages and the game, he's a different caliber of athlete than what we saw at Kansas. His ability to create separation, to finish in the lane. It really wasn't there for most of the season. We saw flashes of it, for example, in that really high-profile BYU game where he absolutely dominated that first half, and he looked head and shoulders like the better prospect compared, to an AJ Dybantsa. So, yes, now, would you have rather have seen that all year long? And that would have made the choice so much more clear. But I would argue, let's say Darryn Peterson would have shut down his season after that BYU game, where everybody had him at 1 at that point, and it was so obvious who the number 1 pick was. Had he not played a single game of college basketball after that, what would the messaging be right now? What would the narrative be around Darryn Peterson? It would really be like he's far and away the number 1 player in the draft. And so that's why this is such a tricky proposition where you get caught up a little bit in the hype of, the general sentiment and the public and all that, and saying like, you saw the lottery broadcast and people were it was really all about AJ Dybantsa. It was almost like he was Victor Wembanyama or Cooper Flagg, and it's not that kind of draft class this year. So, if you're the Washington Wizards, if you're the Utah Jazz, you can't get caught up in that. And I don't think they will. I mean, these people have been around the NBA for decades, and they're going to be doing their research because nobody's going to care if you get it wrong, and if it's obvious from day one in October and November that you should have drafted Darryn Peterson 1 or Cam Boozer, this is going to haunt you for the rest of your career, because it really was obvious in so many different settings that Darryn Peterson was the most talented player in this draft. If you look back at those games that they competed against each other, Utah Prep against Prolific Prep, Darryn Peterson was far and away the more talented player. He was, was playing point guard and he was dominant. AJ Dybantsa had great games too, but it wasn't really close between them. And so if you're a Wizards fan, if you're a Wizard, I would hope that they're looking at the entire body of work here, because this is a really, really tricky proposition at number 1. And if they end up with AJ Dybantsa at 1, obviously they're going to have gone through a very thorough and detailed process. But I'm going to be really curious to see how it all plays out.
Jonathan, the San Antonio Spurs, what they've done with as young of a team as we've seen in forever, to be in the NBA Finals. Everybody knew Victor Wembanyama was going to be at the very top of the league and dominant very quickly in his career. He's got a chance to dominate the league in ways I think nobody's ever dominated it. The way Wilt Chamberlain dominated it in a very different era. He hasn't even scratched the surface of what he can be. But what's Stephen Castle, what Harper have done, this really young group around him, has it even been surprising to you to see a team, leaning on these young guys outside of Victor and really being on the cusp, 4 wins now away from a championship?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you talk to people with the San Antonio Spurs, I mean, they did not expect this to happen so quickly. I mean, they thought this was going to be a year where they're gathering playoff experience, where they're going through this, these battles and they're getting the experience needed to be in this position in a year from now and 2 years from now. So to be this far ahead of schedule, it just shows you, how much talent they have, to be able to draft this high year after year after year, and to pick a Steph Castle at 4, a Dylan Harper at 2, and to get, arguably the best player in the NBA right now in Victor Wembanyama at 1, it just shows you how fortunate you need to be as an NBA team to be selecting that high year after year. And so I think they're cognizant of that. I mean, there's a humility there where they understand, we were really, really lucky to be in this position now. We're not geniuses, this fell into our lap to a certain extent. And now we did a very good job of surrounding Victor with really good talent, with a De'Aaron Fox, and a Julian Champagnie and a Devin Vassell. You have to position yourself correctly to put yourself in this situation. But this doesn't happen if they don't move up on draft night and select Victor Wembanyama, if they don't move up on draft night and get Dylan Harper, and then they made the correct choice also at 4 with Steph Castle. That wasn't an obvious choice in a really weak draft. And Steph Castle has been incredible. He's exceeded everybody's expectations. And so like you have to make your own luck in the NBA, but like they got really lucky to be in this position. And a lot of it starts with Victor Wembanyama.
And now with the dramatic change in the draft lottery, the way in which the Spurs built this team, probably you can't build a team. You can't draft that high or have number one, have the odds, or number two, be able really to draft that high in those kind of successive years, or really have the opportunity to do it. That door is almost closed, right? The way the Spurs were fortunate here in the last few years, it's really going to change team building in the NBA.
It really is, because you look at the way Oklahoma City, like how did they get to where they are? Like you have to go way back to drafting James Harden, drafting Russell Westbrook, drafting Chet Holmgren. I mean, like these are all primo talents that they picked really high, in the draft. And then they were really smart too. I mean, Jalen Williams, and then you go back even to drafting Serge Ibaka. Like they did really, really well with their draft picks, but like it changes the complexion of team building forever. And I think I really have no idea how it's going to all play out. Like, how do these really bad teams that like a Sacramento, the Kings, or, how do you position yourself moving forward? It's going to be really interesting to see, because you're not going to be able to do it the way that the Spurs did or the Thunder did. You're going to have to be more like the Knicks, I guess, but like not everybody is in Manhattan, like such an attractive destination to be able to draw all these talents and make these really, really shrewd moves that the Knicks made year after year, because you're not going to be as attractive a destination as the Knicks are. So I'm not sure how it's going to all play out. It's going to be really interesting to see.
The NBA playoffs have arrived, and the best odds on basketball are on Novig. Stop paying sportsbook fees and start making your predictions on America's #1 sports trading app. Check out Novig and use code WOJ to get $50 worth of Novig coins when you spend your first $5. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 or older. Please play responsibly. It's interesting because the league, when they did the last collective bargaining agreement, what they wanted to do was spread the talent around the league. They put essentially what's a hard cap on the NBA with that second apron, and they really wanted to end the 3 max player system, make it 2 max, really be able to afford 2 max players, and then that third max player can't go to the Lakers or Golden State or the Knicks, or he's going to find his way to smaller markets. That was the hope. But now this really makes it harder for the small market teams whose best way, and almost really only way, to acquire a superstar is through the draft. Oklahoma City did it with SGA because of a trade and the timing of the Clippers trying to get Kawhi Leonard in free agency. Kawhi wanted Paul George on the team, and they were in a position where to get Kawhi, they had to make that trade, even though their preference probably would have been just to keep SGA and move forward. Kawhi wasn't sold on that. And so Oklahoma City gets an MVP in a trade at 20, 21 years old, whatever SGA was at that point. That's once in a 25-year, 30-year. That's just not going to happen. And so the way teams now are going to have to build is, you're right, it's going to have to be far different. And, I know the league wanted to curb tanking. They hated it. It kind of came to an inflection point this year, and criticism in the league always reacts to criticism. And so, but I do think you're right, for the small market teams, it's going to be really hard for them to build championship level rosters.
I agree, but I would also push back to an extent and remind people that like a lot of the best players in the NBA were not top 3 draft picks. Like you look at a Nikola Jokic drafted 41st. You look at a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, drafted 12th. You look at Giannis drafted 15th. You look at, you talk about like a Draymond or, who's second round pick, Jimmy Butler, who is the 30th pick. So I think that it's a little bit of a cop out, like to say like, well, if I can't draft third, I have no top three, I have no chance at, winning a championship. There are a lot of really good teams who were not just built exclusively around those top three picks. And so it puts a much bigger emphasis on your scouting department, on your evaluations. And, there are other ways of being a championship contender. I mean, look at a Jalen Brunson, for example. He's the best player on the Knicks. I mean, he was a second round pick. So there's other ways of becoming a championship contender besides, like what the Spurs did and, what the Oklahoma City did to a certain extent. I mean, Oklahoma City, they have the best player in the NBA by trading for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And so it's not one size fits all in the NBA.
Jonathan, the way that NIL and rev share we talked about it earlier, sent so many guys back to school. And there was a time when you were doing this job and evaluating players, so much was built on drafting guys who had very little body of work. It was very little to go on, and teams had to make decisions based on upside. The second round used to just be, in many cases, we're going to draft on upside. Now you see teams who see the financial ability to get those players in if they're over the cap, they're in luxury tax, guys who can help them quicker. Because guys are staying in college longer and European players now are coming to play college basketball, and you get to see them not just in FIBA, but in playing against college players playing in America, starting to make that transition. Is it easier in that way for teams? Are they getting a better ability to, doesn't mean guys aren't still making mistakes in the draft process, but is there more information now for the most part, for probably 90% of the draft outside the one and done guys? Is there more information and more of an opportunity to make better decisions because you're getting a longer runway of evaluation with these guys before you have to make a decision on picking them?
Yeah, there is. I mean, I think the draft has trended a little bit older here the last few years. And, especially the second round, it's, my second round is pretty much all seniors and older international players. And so it does give you, more of a runway to learn more about these players. But, you still have to scout them really well, like really early. Like there's a lot to be gleaned from the earliest samples too. And then you look at like a Jaden Quintans, for example, like who he only played 4 games at Kentucky this year. And so do you take that guy top 10 or does he end up sliding to 25? I mean, that's a really, really tough decision. You look at like, a Darryn Peterson, who, like we talked about earlier, he did not have the sample that we would have hoped. Caleb Wilson, for example, he gets hurt. And so, what did you think about a Dybantsa earlier in his college career? I mean, we got to learn more and more about him. And so, the best teams in the NBA are going to be the ones that have the best scouting infrastructure, who have the best talent evaluators, who, have the best analytics staff, who gather the best intel. And so, yes, there's still surprises every year, even with the guys who are older players, who are seniors. I mean, a lot of them end up exceeding expectations. And so, I agree with you that there's more info than ever about these guys, but there's still going to be a huge separation here between like the best front offices in the NBA and the worst ones.
John, the fun 2-part conversation with you. I know you got to get to the gym, get your eyes on a new crop of players. Thanks as always, and have fun here leading up to draft night.
Thanks, Woj.
Thanks again to Jonathan Givony of Draft Express. A fun 2-part conversation with Jonathan this week. We'll catch you next week on the program.